Hello, I'm Stacy Smedley, Director of Sustainability at Skanska USA.
And my name is Mer Kaplan. I'm the Senior Sustainability Director for Skanska USA Building, and I lead our sustainability advising team as well as a number of our national initiatives. While Skanska has been recognized many times over as a values-based company for more than a century, our sustainability journey was more formally launched by an incident in Sweden 25 years ago. It caused us to move our human safety and environmental protection policies and practices to the top of our priority list. They continue to be leading performance indicators for ourselves and our stakeholders, and continual improvement is a core tenet for us, and particularly for our sustainability team. Our team is always moving that ball forward. The environmental side of that journey began with work around our most direct, visible impact areas, things like waste reduction, chemical control, and general pollution prevention, all of which and much, much, much more falls under our ISO 14001 program. And over the years, we've expanded our indicators, we've refined our data collection and reporting, applied what we learned to our advocacy work, and have worked both internally and with clients to reduce our shared footprint. Now, as part of that evolution, about a decade ago, we had started to collect and report our carbon footprint data. It was a lot of great information and a lot of work. Stacy can attest to that as well. It was supported through creating an internal footprinting app specific to the scopes of carbon found in construction. As you would imagine, things like material and craftsperson transportation, fuel use, energy, waste, and the materials themselves, of course. So the key problem was that it was hard to tell where we were able to make better choices on the materials because there was little transparency on their individual emissions. Several years ago, the U.S. Green Building Council and their new LEED version 4 program had a new credit requirement of providing material transparency documents, what the industry calls environmental product declarations, and we like to call them EPDs because it's just easier to say. But that changed everything. We found that EPDs gave us that ability to legitimately compare materials and choose better. We needed an easier path, though, for comparing those EPDs. So through collaboration with the Carbon Leadership Forum and others, we created an open source tool to solve that problem. And Stacy is going to share more on that now because she was integral to that.
Thanks, Mar. And I just want to make a point that, while Skanska has been looking at the carbon emission impacts of our construction practices for around 10 years, as Mar mentioned, the industry has really awakened around this, I would say, in the past 5, as the urgency around climate action and reducing emissions in line with science-based targets has really increased. Just as a point, we know that the building sector contributes at least 40% of all global greenhouse gas emissions, and that over 10% of this is attributed now to the embodied carbon emissions of the construction materials that we manufacture, transport, and install. So as buildings become more operationally efficient and energy grids decarbonize, these material emissions become an even more significant piece of that pie. And based on what we've done over the past 10 years at Skanska, we know that currently, on average, more than half of a new building's carbon emissions are its embodied carbon emissions, if we look at a 2045 or 2050 zero carbon horizon. So these environmental product declarations that Mer mentioned give the construction industry a lens into the carbon footprint of building materials. They're third-party verified disclosures that manufacturers and suppliers invest in to disclose the environmental impacts of their products. They include the kilograms of CO2 equivalent per unit. So you can kind of think of EPDs as environmental nutrition labels for building materials, where they have a serving size or a declared unit and a carbohydrate content or a kilogram of CO2 per unit. As Skanska dug deeper into our carbon accounting and looked to move from simply reporting to actually reducing, we saw these EPDs as a key source of data to begin to create what we call carbon estimates for projects. And this enables us to provide material cost and carbon data during the specification and procurement phases to really drive low carbon material choices wherever possible. These EPDs typically have lived in PDF documents on manufacturer websites. And as we began to source these documents ourselves, it became very clear that there needed to be an easier way to access and use these product-specific carbon emissions data points to find and compare materials and plan projects. So, as Mer mentioned, Skanska seed funded the development of a free open access tool that we named the Embodied Carbon in Construction Calculator, or EC3. And EC3 is a digital database that currently holds close to 40,000 digitized EPDs across all major material categories. And this has really enabled anyone in the industry, not only Skanska, to source products and manufacturers that have invested in transparency and disclosure and select the lowest carbon material options that meet their project requirements. The tool was incubated by the Carbon Leadership Forum at the University of Washington and now lives at a nonprofit called Building Transparency, and has been supported, informed, and piloted by over 50 industry partners, including Microsoft, on their campus modernization project in Redmond, Washington. What we're seeing our partners do as they use the tool at Skanska, but also at other private companies across the country, is dig into the manufacturer emissions across major categories like concrete, steel, timber, curtain wall, insulation, gypsum board, framing, and really look at the manufacturers that have low carbon options. This can get built into the specifications for a project and then into the procurement that someone like Skanska can put into place. And on projects that have used the tool, we've seen an over 30% reduction in carbon emissions at no cost to date. With over 14,000 users currently using EC3, we see this as a game changer for the industry. Skanska has made a commitment to utilize the tool on projects, particularly looking at concrete first across our offices in the US. And we really look at this as a way to really spearhead how we look at transparency and environmental impacts of what we built. I'll turn it back over to Mer to talk a little more about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you didn't catch it from Stacy, EC3 is foundational. I love using that word when we talk about the tool. It's the first step to making better decisions when it comes to choosing materials that have lower emissions. So now you might be asking yourself where we go from here as innovators. What's the next path or the next tier of innovative thought around impact reduction? And there's plenty to talk about, from material ingredient and design changes to electrification of equipment and everything in between. And we're working on all of the things. So what I want to highlight, though, is something that ties in with EC3 and with your own corporate sustainability strategy and values. I want to call this whole impact thinking. We know, as Stacy referenced, that cost is almost always a key variable, if not the deciding factor. We know that becomes more complex when we see that something will provide operational benefit like energy efficiency, but it's a higher capital spend. It's become much more common that we are running these cost estimates, like Stacy shared, that layer in those carbon impacts. However, there are a dozen sustainability lenses that can and should be layered in with cost, and we're doing that for ourselves and for clients. So whole impact decision making comes from good research and knowledge. It goes beyond life cycle analysis or life cycle cost or circularity alone. So a good example might be choosing between different building envelope options. Baseline, what's the difference in carbon emissions? Then we look beyond, is the source local, uber local, family owned, disadvantaged, and or sustainably operated? Does it meet your chemical restriction criteria? Will that product need more maintenance or cleaning or replacement over time, particularly if it will require more maintenance or cleaning? How safely will craftspeople be able to access it? Will it deteriorate faster on the south side of your building, or if there's an ocean side that's taking more salt water? What is that future overall impact? So what we've learned is that the problem of comparing construction material carbon emissions has largely been solved through EC3. Pretty proud of that, and Stacy. But combined with the increasing, transparency of the supply chain over time, it's just going to help everyone change their carbon impact. And what we know too is that the next level of innovation is that broader impact thinking and analysis. This means strategic and values-based project planning and continued collaboration to get to zero. Thank you.